Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, we'll be sewing this gown with side ruffles and a boat neck. In my last video, we drafted the pattern. The link to that video will be in the description. So if you'd like to see how this was put together, then let's get right into the tutorial. I have cut out my pieces and I've also interfaced the upper part of this dress. I used a medium weight wadding for the bodies. On the center panel from the upper bust to the waist, I interfaced with a wadding for more structure around the bust, and on the neck area I used a shirt collar interfacing and on the back neck as well. I'll be sewing on this hemming gum on the back armhole as well to help define the shape around the arm. I'll go ahead and assemble the bodies. I've pinned the bodice in place. I'll go ahead and run a straight stitch and I'll be sewing at 0.5 inch seam allowance. The front bodice has been assembled and all curved areas notched to release any tension. I'll go ahead and sew close the dart on the back bodice. The upper bodice has been completed. We'll move on to assemble the lining. Sew close the darts on the skirts as well. Here are all my pieces assembled and I've given them a good press. This is the lining of the front bodice, the main front bodice with the princess seams well ironed out. This is the lining of the both sides of the back bodice and the main back bodice, the lining of the front skirt. Both front and back lining measured 22 inches with seam allowance. Remember, the length of my skirt measured 22 inches plus 2-inch hem allowance. Then the skirt for the front and back panels. I will sew on this hemming gum on the back armhole. This will help define the curve round the armhole and will help hold the lining to the bodies when we iron this gown after it has been completed. So now we are going to assemble the bodies to the skirt, and I'm starting with the back panel. I will pin it in place, stitch it with a straight stitch, and I'll do the same for the front panel. I've attached the bodies to the skirt for the front and back panels. I'll go ahead and place the measurements of my clients to shape this dress and mark how the ruffles will be placed. So here I place the waist measurement, the hip measurement. I'll connect these 2 points, then I'll take it down to the measurement of the hem of the dress. So guys, I've marked how the ruffles will be placed on the front panel, and I have placed my back panel on the front to enable me retrace the exact seam line on the back. So I'm going to follow the line on the front with pins so that I can retrace the exact line on the back. I have drawn in the line of the shape of our ruffle. At the center back of the dress, I left a 4 inches slit for easy movement. So I'm going to measure the line on the front all the way to the back. On the back panel, I have 39.25 inches. 0.75 inch is my seam allowance, while on the front panel I have 38.5 inches. Before we work on the ruffles, we are going to sew close the side seam of this dress and attach our invisible zipper. So guys, I've sewn close the side seams and have attached the invisible zipper. On this next slide, I've written down how I calculated my ruffles and how many meters of fabric used. So I've cut out 5.5 meters of fabric here for the ruffles, and the width is 18 inches. This includes seam allowance. I have gone ahead and hemmed the hem of the ruffle all the way around. I'll go ahead and gather it. The ruffles has been gathered. I will go ahead and pin it in place on that line I marked on the front and the back panels of this dress. So guys, I've pinned it in place and this is what it looks like. Unfortunately, the ruffle didn't go round. I still have some space at the back. This is how much that is remaining on the back, and this measured 26 inches. I think I ended up using 8.5 meters to create this ruffle. For this, I cut out extra 3 meters because I went in and tightened the gathers that I've already pinned to make the ruffles more fuller. So guys, I've attached the ruffles and this is what it's looking like. I really like how it turned out. My client has very wide hips, so this really confirmed with the shape of her body. I've also gone ahead and sewn up the lining just the same way I assembled the dress. I'll go ahead and attach it to the dress. I've pinned the lining to the dress and I'll start first with attaching the neckline. I've attached the lining to the neckline and top stitched. I also attached around the armhole or the sleeve. You can see how neat it turned out. All seams are tucked inside. We'll be attaching the other side together and I'll show you guys how I achieved this result. You're going to match the right side of your lining to the right side of your garment like so, making sure the shoulder seam of your lining match to that of your garment, and you're going to pin the lining to the garment all the way around the armhole. The width of my sleeve is 1 inch, so it was a little bit of a challenge to maneuver this. If the width of your sleeve is much wider, it will be easier for you to work your way around this. So I'm going to continue pinning the lining to the fabric this way to as far as I can get. If your shoulder width is small like mine, I'd advise you pin directly on your seam allowance line, pushing away any fabric under, like so. You will not be worried about catching any fabric while you sew close the armhole. So I have pinned round the armhole up to this point, matching every point of the lining to the fabric, to the main fabric. I'll notch at the point where the sleeve curves towards the armhole to enable me stitch that corner and get the shape correctly. I'm going to attach the lining to the main fabric with a straight stitch round this armhole up to the point where I stop pinning, and I'll be sewing at 0.5 inch seam allowance. So guys, I've sewn close this side of the armhole. You remember I didn't pin around the armhole because of how small the width of my shoulder is. So I'm going to pull the fabric out so that I can sew close the other side as well. For someone working with a wider shoulder width, you'll be able to do this once. Please ensure that the width of your lining on the shoulder and around the armhole is at least 0.25 inch shorter than your main bodies, so that when you attach the lining to your bodies and turn it to the right side, the seam line at the edge of the armhole will be slightly pulled inwards, giving you a more cleaner finish. From that point where my stitches stopped, I'm going to pin it in place and sew close the rest of the opening.
Now my time to spend my money. Been the suffer time to jolly. Oh no, cause if I no get that worry, I can see that bars ready to spend.
To get the lining relaxed around the armhole and prevent it from peeping out, you will notch round all the cuff corners to release tension so that you can easily top stitch the seam allowance on the lining. I have notched round the cuff corners. I have also notched at that point where the sleeve curves towards the armhole. I'll go ahead and top stitch the seam allowance on the lining. So guys, I have top stitched the seam allowance on the lining. For this top stitching, you will not be able to go around the armhole, so you will just go in as far as you can.
I want to celebrate, oh. I want to take a oh. I want to celebrate, oh. I want to take a
This is how your dress will turn out. You're going to have a clean finish around the neckline and around the armhole as well. The seam line around the armhole or sleeve will be slightly pulled inwards if you make your lining a bit shorter than the bodice of your garment. Like if you make it like 0.25 inch shorter than the bodice of your garment, this will give you that professional finish around the edge of your armhole. So I'll let you guys watch through how this turned out before we go ahead to attach the lining to the zipper.
I want to enjoy. Let me my soul, so make I feel alright, feel alright. She give me the vibe, so make I day alright.
To have the seam allowance of your zipper tucked in between the garment and the lining, you're going to pin your lining to the garment, right sides facing each other like I am doing, making sure the seam on the waistline of the lining matches that of your garment. You're going to pin this in place and attach them with a straight stitch.
So play me my song, so make I feel alright, feel alright. So give me the vibe, so make I day alright. I don't need nobody.
So guys, I've done that and this is what our dress is looking like. I'll go ahead and attach the lining to the hem of the dress first before we stitch close the center back of this lining. So to attach the lining to the hem of the dress and have the seams hidden, you just follow along the way I am showing in the video. You're going to pin the right sides of your lining to the right sides of your garment all the way around and sew. You can as well go ahead and sew without pinning, but I like to pin to ensure that all points are matched correctly.
To come and worry my battle when you look caro. Look, I'm ready, and I don't need to worry. My mama they pray for me, make fire no catch somebody. I want to sing along when everybody see me gone.
So I've attached the lining to the hem of the dress and I've also stitched close the center back of the lining. The only place remaining to complete this gown is the slit, and we'll be sewing it with the seam allowance tucked in. To run this stitch, you're going to open one side of the lining and you're going to start with the slit on the other side, not on the side where you open the lining. I have opened this side of the lining and I will go in and grab the slit on the left side where the lining is not open. I will match up the seam allowance of the lining to the garment and run a straight stitch on the seam allowance line. Then I'll do the same on the right side of the slit. So you're going to stitch close this place like so, like I'm showing you, after which you stitch the other side of the slit where you open the lining. So guys, I've done that and the sewing of this gown is complete. On the seam line of the armhole, I'm going to tack it down on both sides to hold that in place. Then on the princess seam as well, I'm going to run back tacks there to also hold that place in place. On the waistline, I will attach the seam allowance of the lining to the seam allowance of the bodice on the front and back panel. And at the hem of this gown, I'll be attaching a hemming gum to stabilize the hem of this gown and on the slit as well. All this I'll be doing from that opening on the side of the lining. So guys, our gown is complete and I've done all that I said. I'm just going to give you guys a rundown.
Them go they wonder what they do this guy, cause I know get their time. I'm a caution, and they hear me ginger. When I just stay enter, it cool in my hot temper. I want to celebrate, oh, I want to take a
So this is the inside of the neck area of our gown. You can see how neat it is. You can see the hemming gum I attached at the back armhole just helped define the shape of that place, and you can see it is completely glued together. This is what the inside of the dress looks like. It's looking very neat. I also added a hemming gum at the hem of the dress to help stabilize that part of the dress. I'll quickly show you guys and let you guys watch through, and do not forget to stitch close the opening on the lining after all stitches has been made.
oh, I want to celebrate, oh, I want to take I want to enjoy.
This brings us to the end of today's tutorial. If you find it helpful, do not forget to give the video a thumbs up, share, comment, leave all your questions and suggestions in the comment section, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you all in my next one. A bientôt!
My battle, when you look caro, look I'm ready, and I don't need to worry.